The Battle of Le Transloy was the last offensive of the Fourth Army of the British Expeditionary Force (BF) in the 1916 Battle of the Somme in France. During the First World War, the battle was fought in conjunction with attacks by the French 10th and 6th Armies on the southern flank and the reserve 5th Army on the northern flank, against Heeresgruppe Rupprecht, Field Marshal Rupprecht of Bavaria, created on 28 August, from the 1st and 2nd Armies of the dissolved armeegruppe Gallwitz-Somme and the 6th and 7th Armies. General Ferdinand Foch, the commander of Groupe des Armées du Nord, Northern Army Group, and coordinator of the armies on the Somme, was unable to continue the sequential attacks by the Anglo-French armies achieved in September, because persistent rain, mist and fog, grounded aircraft, turned the battlefield into a swamp and greatly increased the difficulty of transporting supplies to the front over the few roads in the area and the land that had been devastated since the 1st of July. The German 2nd and 1st Armies on the Somme managed a recovery after the string of defeats in September, with fresh divisions to replace exhausted troops and more aircraft, artillery and ammunition diverted from the battle at Verdun and stripped from other parts of the Western Front. Command of the German Air Service, Die Fliegertruppen, was centralized and the new Luftstreitkraft, German Air Force, was able to challenge Anglo-French air superiority with the reinforcements and new, superior fighter aircraft. The German flyers further reduced the ability of the Anglo-French airmen to support the armies with artillery observation and contact patrols. In the rare periods of clear weather, the German armies lost much less ground and had fewer casualties in October than in September, the costliest month of the battle. But the proportion of casualties increased from 78.9% to 82.3% of the Anglo-French total. The reinforcement of the Somme front, with troops and equipment from Verdun, also contributed to the German defeat in the first offensive. Battle of Verdun. 1 Air Bataille offensive to Verdun, the 20th of October, the 2nd of November, and the loss of Forts Douaumont and Vaux. Rain, fog and mud was a lesser problem for the Germans, who had to carry supplies forward over a much narrower beaten zone and were being forced back onto undamaged ground. German bombardments on the few roads between the original front line and the line established by October increased the difficulties of the 4th and 6th Armies, and during October the size and ambition of attacks was reduced progressively to local operations. The soldiers of the British, French and German armies endured miserable conditions, in which the Germans were able to keep going in the knowledge that the onset of winter would end the Somme offensive. Despite the many extra casualties caused by illness, the British and French benefited from superior numbers, which enabled the Allied commanders to relieve divisions after shorter periods in the line. Severe criticism of General Sir Douglas Haig and General Henry Rawlinson during and since the war, for persisting with attacks on October, was challenged in 2009 by Philpott, who put the British share of the battle into the context of strategic subordination to French wishes. Joffre's general Allied offensive and the continuation of French attacks south of Le Transloy, which had to be supported by British operations and by more recent writing of the ordeal inflicted on the German armies. Background. Strategic developments. In September, Foch had managed to organize sequential attacks by the 4 Anglo-French armies on the Somme, which had captured more ground than any previous month and inflicted the worst casualties on the German armies of the battle. During the Battle of Morval, 25 to 28 September, the French 6th Army, General Émile Fayolle, had crossed the Péronne-Bapaume road around Bouchavans. The 4th Army, General Henry Rawlinson, had taken Morval, Lesbos and Gallwitz-Somme in the center, and the reserve army, Lieutenant General Hubert Gough, which became the Fifth Army on 30 October, had captured most of Thiepval Ridge on the left flank. On 29 September, General Sir Douglas Haig instructed the Fourth Army to plan operations to advance towards Bapaume, reaching Le Transloy on the right and Loupart Wood north of the Albert-Bapaume road on the left. The reserve army was to extend the attacks of the Fourth Army by making converging attacks on the Ancre Valley after the Battle of Thiepval Ridge, 26 to 28 September, by attacking northwards towards Loupart Wood, Earls and Miramont on the south bank. On 28 August, the Chief of the General Staff, General Erich von Falkenhayn, simplified the German command structure on the Western Front by establishing two army groups. Groupe Kronprinz Rupprecht controlled the 6th, 1st and 2nd Armies, from the Belgian coast to the boundary of Groupe Deutsche Kronprinz, south of the Somme battlefield. Heeresgruppe Gallwitz-Somme was dissolved and General Max von Gallwitz reverted to the command of the 2nd Army. The emergency in Russia caused by the Brusilov offensive, the entry of Romania into the war and French counterattacks at Verdun, put further strain on the German army. Falkenhayn had been sacked from the OL on 28 August and replaced by Hindenburg and Ludendorff. This third OL ordered an end to attacks at Verdun and the dispatch of troops to Romania and the Somme front. Colonel Fritz von Lossberg, Chief of Staff of the Second Army, was also able to establish Ablassungsdivision Division N, relief divisions, 10 to 15 miles, 16 to 24 kilometers, behind the battlefield, ready to replace tired divisions. German counterattacks became bigger and more frequent, making the Anglo-French advance slower and more costly. After the Anglo-French attacks in mid-September, a comprehensive relief of the frontline divisions had been possible. On 5 September, proposals for a shorter line to be built in France were ordered from the commanders of the Western armies, who met Hindenburg and Ludendorff at Cambrai on 8 September. The new leadership announced that no reserves were available for offensive operations, except those planned for Romania. Ludendorff condemned the policy of holding ground regardless of its tactical value and advocated holding frontline positions with the minimum of troops and to recapture lost positions by counter-attacks. On 21 September, after the Battle of Flores-Courcelette, 15 to 22 September, Hindenburg ordered that the Somme front was to have priority in the west for troops. During September, the Germans had sent another 13 fresh divisions to the British sector and scraped up troops wherever they could be found. The German artillery had fired 213 train loads of field artillery shells and 217 train loads of heavy artillery ammunition. Yet the DE acute BUT of the tank, the defeat at Thiepval, 26 to 28 September, and the 130,000 casualties suffered by the armies on the Somme in September, had been severe blows to German morale. Tactical developments. German artillery on the Somme slowly improved in its effect when Gallwitz centralized counter-battery fire and used aircraft reinforcements for artillery observation, which increased the accuracy and efficiency of bombardments. The Second Army had been starved of reinforcements in mid-August to replace exhausted divisions in the First Army, and plans for a counterstroke had been abandoned for lack of troops. Reinforcements for the Somme front in September began to reduce the German inferiority in guns and aircraft. Field artillery reduced its barrage frontage from 400 to 200 yards, 370 to 182 meters, per battery and increased its accuracy by using one air artillery flight. Artilleriefliegerabteilung per division. As the Germans had been pushed out of their original defenses, Lossberg established new positions based on principles of depth, dispersal and camouflage, rather than continuous lines of trenches. Rigid defense of the front line continued, but with as few soldiers as possible, relying on the firepower of machine guns firing from behind the front line and from the flanks. The area behind the front line was defended by support and reserve units, dispersed on reverse slopes, undulations and in any other cover that could be found, so that they could open machine gun fire by surprise from unseen positions and then counterattack swiftly, before French and British infantry could consolidate captured ground. The largest German counterattacks of the Somme battle took place from 20 to 23 September. From the Somme north to St. Pierre Vaast Wouden were destroyed by French artillery fire, rather than pack troops into the front line. Local corps and army reserves were held back, in lines about 2,000 yards, 1,800 meters, apart, able to make progressively stronger counter-attacks. Trenches were still dug but were no longer intended to be fought from, being used for shelter during quiet periods, for the movement of reinforcements and supplies and as rallying points and decoys. Before an attack, the garrison tried to move forwards into shell holes, to avoid Allied artillery fire and to surprise attacking infantry with machine gun fire. Opposite the French, the Germans dug new defences on a reverse slope from the Tortille stream at Alains to the west end of St. Pierre Vaast Wood and from there to Morval, connected to a new fourth position, Stellung, from Sailly-Salissal to Morval and Bapaume along the Peronne-Bapaume road. French agents also reported new construction 35 miles. 56 kilometers to the east. Ludendorff created 15 new divisions by combing out troops at depots and by removing regiments from existing divisions, and the new 212th, 213th and 214th divisions replaced worn-out divisions opposite the French 10th and 6th armies. Prelude. Anglo-French plan of attack. Fayolle planned attacks to capture Sailly-Salissal to the northwest of St. Pierre Vaast Wood, to be followed by outflanking attacks to the north and south. Avoiding a frontal attack, Fayolle expected to be ready to attack Sailly-Salissal by 7 to 8 October, but if an attack towards Roquigny could begin earlier, the Fourth Army was to attack to cover the French left flank. Sailly-Salissal was along the Peronne-Bapaume road and Salissal lay at right angles on the east side, along the Moislaine Street, Pierre Vaast road and overlooked a shallow valley to the north towards Le Transloy. The difficulties of movement in the rear, wet weather in October and the terrain, channeled the attacks of the Sixth Army into a gap between St. Pierre Vaast Wood and the Fourth Army boundary. At the end of September, the Sixth Army took over the Fourth Army front at Morval, which widened the attack front to about 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers. The French 32nd Corps, which held the front from Rancourt to Fréjaucourt, was to attack the Salissals, and First Corps to the left would attack eastwards from Morval, to capture Bukovina and Jatajezof trenches in the German fourth position in front of the Peronne-Bapaume road, capture the north end of the Salissals and reach Roquigny. The 4th, Reserve and 3rd Armies were to be ready by the 12th of October. The 4th Army to attack towards Le Transloy, Boulencourt, the ridge beyond the Loy-Wallencourt Valley to Loupart Wood, about a mile east of Earls. Before the main attack, the Fourth Army was to advance northeastwards to capture a spur west of Le Transloy and Boulogne-Court and north to the edge of the Belloy Wall and Court Valley. Haig thought that if there was normal autumn weather, the objectives could be achieved, but some restrictions on artillery ammunition consumption were imposed and more aircraft were requested from England. An attack on the 1st of October was to advance the left flank, capture Eaucourt and part of the Flores Line, also known as the La Sarthe Line, up to La Sarthe. The reserve army was to advance towards Pouilly, as the right flank met the attacks from the south bank at Miramont, enveloping German troops in the upper Ancre Valley. The Third Army was to provide a flank guard north of the reserve army by occupying a spur south of Gommecourt. Operations were to begin by the 12th of October. After the Fourth Army had attacked towards Le Transloy and Boulogne-Court and the French Sixth Army had attacked Sailly-Saint-Lizel. The French 10th Army south of the Somme was to attack on the 10th of October, north of Chalons. Fourth Army The attack was to be conducted by 3rd Corps and the New Zealand Division of 15th Corps on the right flank, which was to advance its left, pivoting from a point in the Gerd trenches, 1,500 yards, 1,400 meters, east of Eaucourt. On the 29th of September, a day of rain and bright spells, the 6th Division and the Guards Division in 14th Corps on the right flank took unopposed some trenches east of Les Beaufs. At 5:30 a.m., a company of the 8th Battalion York and Lancaster Regiment of the 23rd Division captured D'Estremont Farm and gained contact with the 2nd Canadian Division, 2nd Corps, on the right flank of the reserve army later on, and a battalion of the 47th Division began to bomb its way up Flores Trench during the evening. On the 30th of September, the day was dull but dry. The battalion pushed the Germans back beyond Flores Switch Trench and a New Zealand battalion kept pace along Flores Support Trench. German defensive preparations. The Germans had built new defensive lines during the battle, and the first two were called the I-Stellung, Allenestellung, Switch Trench I Position, Alain's Line, a double line of trenches and barbed wire several miles further back, as a new second line of defense along the ridge north of the Ancre Valley, from Essarts to Bucquoy, west of Archet-le-Petit, Loupart Wood, south of Gravelines, west of Bapaume to Le Transloy and Sailly-Saint-Lizel. On the reverse slope of that ridge, the II-Stellung, Arminstellung, rear trench 2 position, Armen Line, ran from Ablain-Savelle to west of Logistwood, west of Archet-le-Grand, the western outskirts of Bapaume, to Roquigny, Le Mesnil en Arassez to Vauxwood. III-Stellung branched from II-Stellung at Archet-le-Grand and ran clockwise around Bapaume, then south to Buny, Whitieres, Nerlou and Temple-la-Fosse. The first two German reserve lines had various British titles: Loupart, Bapaume, Le Transloy, Bihucourt lines, and the third line was known as the Buny-Whitieres Switch. From the 25th of September to the beginning of October, Rupprecht relieved the 6th Bavarian Division, 50th Reserve Division and the 52nd Reserve Division with the 7th Reserve Division, 6th Bavarian Reserve Division and 18th Reserve Division opposite the 4th Army. Part of 13 fresh divisions installed opposite the British. From the 30th of September to the 13th of October, the 6 divisions from Le Transloy to the Ancre River were relieved by 7 fresh divisions, 2 of which were then relieved by the 6th Division, 2nd Bavarian Division, 19th Reserve Division, 28th Reserve Division, 24th Division, 40th Division, 4th Ersatz Division, 5th Ersatz Division and Marinikerkorps Flandern from the Belgian coast. From the 24th of October to the 10th of November, The 7 divisions from Le Transloy to the Ancre were relieved, as was one of the fresh divisions, by the 38th Division, 222nd Division, Bavarian Ersatzdivision, 4th Guard Division, 58th Division, 1st Guards Reserve Division, 23rd Reserve Division and the 24th Reserve Division. In mid-November, the Marine Brigade reinforced the Guard Reserve Corps near Wallencourt. Battle. 4th Army equals the 1st of October equals at 7:00 a.m. on a fine day. A deliberate bombardment began along the 4th Army front and continued steadily until 0 hour. At 3:15 p.m. in the Gerd trenches on the right flank, captured during the preliminary operations, the Special Brigade refired oil cylinders from 36 Livens projectors. A minute before the infantry attack by the New Zealand Division on the left of 15th Corps, Lieutenant General John Duquesne, 30 of the cylinders burst on target, enveloping the objective in flame and smoke, but despite the bombs, German machine gunners inflicted many casualties on the depleted 2nd Canterbury and 2nd Otago battalions of the 2nd New Zealand Brigade. The 2nd Canterbury captured quickly the Gerd trenches up to Goose Alley and the east end of Circus Trench, which was on a southwest line down to the Flores trenches. The 2nd Otago attacked from Goose Alley and passed beyond the objective and the Circus, an empty German strongpoint. The New Zealanders reorganized on the Le Barque Road and with reinforcements consolidated a new line in contact with the 47th Division near Abbey Road. The New Zealanders lost many men of the 850 left for the attack and took 250 prisoners. On the right flank of the 3rd Corps, Lieutenant General W. Pulteney, area on the left flank of the 4th Army, the 47th Division, Brigadier General W. H. Greenlee, then Major General G. F. Gorringe, attacked with the 141st Brigade, with 3 battalions and 2 tanks. The 119th Th London Regiment, 119th Th London, got to within 50 yards, 46 meters, of the German line, was forced under cover by machine gun fire and waited for the tanks. The tanks drove left along the Flores trenches firing into them, and the infantry captured the trenches easily, despite the many earlier casualties. As the support waves consolidated Flores support trench, the leading infantry pressed on past Eaucourt-l'Abbaye, and met the New Zealanders at the Le Barque Road. The 120th Th London attacked Eaucourt and crossed the Flores trenches after the 2 tanks has passed by, swept through Eaucourt and gained touch with the 119th Th London. The tanks pressed on but bogged west of Eaucourt. The 117th Th London on the left flank had already been stopped by uncut wire and German machine gun fire, during a counter-attack by part of 2 Battalion, Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 17. The tanks were set on fire and abandoned. The 50th Division, Major General P. S. Wilkinson, attacked with the 151st Brigade. On the right the 16th Th Durham Light Infantry, 16th Th DLI, was exposed by the repulse of the 117th Th London, had many casualties from German machine gun fire and was only able to capture a short length of Flores Trench. The 19th Th DLI, Lieutenant Colonel R. B. Bradford, came up from reserve and Bradford managed to organize another attack, capturing the rest of Flores Trench by 9:30 p.m. In the center, a composite battalion of the 1/5th Th Border, 1/8th Th DLI and the 1/5th Th Northumberland Fusiliers attacked from the 149th Brigade on the left, benefited from an excellent barrage to advance and capture the Flores trenches before the defenders could react. On the left flank of 3rd Corps, the 23rd Division, Major General J. M. Babington, attacked with the 70th Brigade, the 11th Sherwood Foresters, 11th Foresters, and the 8th King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry, 8th KOYLI, assembled forward of their trenches, which were on a southeast line from d'Estremont Farm. On the right, the 11th Foresters captured Fleurs Trench and most of Fleurs' support, then linked with the 151st Brigade. On the left, the 8th KOYLI faced determined resistance and only later was able to bomb the Germans back up Fleurs Trench and link with the 2nd Canadian Division on the reserve army boundary. The 9th York and Lancs went forward as a reinforcement and tried to probe Les Sars, but was repulsed by small arms fire from the houses. Communication with the rear broke down and the divisional and corps headquarters were not reliably informed of events until early on the 2nd of October. The 47th Division headquarters realized that the 117th th London had been repulsed and sent forward. The tired and under-strength 123rd Road London 142nd Brigade, which repeated the attack at 6:54 a.m. and was repulsed with 170 casualties, equals 2 to 6 October equals. During the night of 1/2 October, the Germans were forced out of Fleurs' support on the 50th Division front, where the 16th th and 19th thdli formed a flank guard on the right next to the 47th Division and defeated several German counterattacks with hand grenades and Stokes mortar fire. It began to rain at 11:00 a.m. and continued for the next 2 days. The 118th th London relieved the 117th th London, and at midday on the 3rd of October, patrols reported that there were few Germans in the trenches opposite Eaucourt. The battalion advanced nearly unopposed northwest of the farm and gained touch with the 120th th London on the right and the 68th Brigade of the 23rd Division, which had relieved the 50th Division Brigade, opposite Les Sars on the left. The 69th Brigade took over from the 70th Brigade and on the 4th of October was repulsed in a pre-dawn attack up Fleurs' support to cross the Albert Bapaume Road. The next Fourth Army attack had been set for the 5th of October, but the rains forced Rawlinson to postpone the attack until the 7th of October. The Sixth Army agreed to the postponement so that the attacks of both armies would simultaneous. The 47th Division occupied the rest of Fleurs' support on the 4th of October and during the night of the 5th of October occupied the site of a mill to the northwest of Eaucourt. The 23rd Division attacked to capture Fleurs' support north of the Albert Bapaume Road at 6:00 p.m. On the 4th of October, a small party of the 10th Battalion Duke of Wellington's regiment cut through the barbed wire by hand and got a footing in the trench but retired after running out of grenades and ammunition. 2 days later, the 11th Northumberland Fusiliers captured the tangle east of Les Sars but found the area untenable and retired. The weather improved on the 4th of October, with high winds and little rain, but low cloud made air observation difficult. On the 14th Corps front, it was difficult to identify German outposts in trenches and derelict gun pits in front of the fortifications of Le Transloy, as it was for the British positions opposite. A high volume of German artillery retaliation when the preliminary bombardment began on the 6th of October was maintained but caused few casualties to British troops waiting for 0 hour at 1:45 p.m. equals the 7th of October equals. The 14th Corps objective was a trench line from 100 to 500 yards, 91 to 457 meters away, and on the right flank the 56th Division, Major General C. P. A. Hull, attacked with 2 brigades, on the right. In the 168th Brigade area, the 114th th Battalion London Scottish found it difficult to maintain contact with the French on the right, who advanced eastwards rather than northeast. The Scottish captured a southern group of gun pits and pushed on to the south end of Hazy Trench, 200 yards, 182 metres beyond. The 1/4 th London was stopped by machine gun fire from the northern gun pits and tried to outflank them on the right. On the left, the 1/12 th London advance was stopped short of Dewdrop Trench to the northeast of Lesbos, which had only been bombarded by Stokes mortars as it was too close to the British front line. In the 167th Brigade area, the 1/1 of a Stone London was repulsed in front of Spectrum Trench except on the left flank where bombers joined with the 17th th Middlesex. After it captured Rainbow Trench, the south end of Spectrum Trench against determined resistance, the 114th th London Scottish and the 1/4 th London defeated a counter-attack, but after dark the battalions were forced back, as were the French on the right. In the 20th Division area, 2 battalions of the 60th Brigade captured Rainbow Trench, shot at German troops who ran away and pressed on 150 yards, 140 metres, to Misty Trench to gain touch with the 17th th Middlesex on the right and the 61st Brigade on the left, which had reached its objective east of Goudecourt. After the 7th KOYLI and the 12th King's Liverpool encountered a line of Germans advancing from Rainbow Trench to surrender, the battalions occupied Rainbow Trench and kept going to 300 yards, 270 metres, to the southeast corner of Cloudy Trench. The 12th Division, Major General A. B. Scott, on the right of 15th Corps had not moved forward, so a defensive flank was formed on the left and a new trench, Shine Trench, dug from Cloudy Trench to the Boulogne Court Road, about 350 yards, 320 metres, of Rainbow Trench southeast of the road was still held by the Germans, who counter-attacked from Boulogne Court at about 5:00 p.m. and were repulsed by small arms fire. In the 15th Corps area, the objective was set 300 yards, 270 metres, forward along the northwest end of Rainbow Trench and Bayonet Trench, the west end of which, beyond the Flores-Deloy Road, had just been discovered. Up to the Gerd trenches. Just before 0 hour a German machine gun barrage began on the front trenches of the 12th Division and began an artillery bombardment, particularly on Goudecourt, which held back the 37th Brigade on the right flank. The 6th Buffs, next to the 20th Division, got into Rainbow Trench with too few survivors to consolidate and retired. The 6th Royal West Kent on the left was stopped by the machine gun barrage, as were the 9th and 8th Royal Fusiliers of the 36th Brigade on the left. The parties of the 8th Royal Fusiliers which got into Bayonet Trench being overwhelmed. In the 41st Division, Major General S. T. B. Lawford, area on the left of 15th Corps, the German machine gun barrage stopped the 32nd and 26th Royal Fusiliers of the 124th Brigade. Halfway to Bayonet Trench, parties reached the trench and were reinforced by the 21st KRRC and 10th Queens. Although by nightfall the brigade had been reduced to a battalion of survivors. On the left, the 122nd Brigade used all 4 battalions and was also shot down. A Livens projectile bombardment of burning oil on the Gerd lines failed, but bombers from the 11th West Kent advanced a short way up both trenches. On the left flank, the divisional and corps boundary, the brigade got forward and linked with the 47th Division on the right of 3rd Corps. in the 3rd Corps area. The 47th and 23rd Division objective required an advance of 500 yards, 460 meters, halfway into Les Sars, and then capture the rest of the village when the offensive began on the Butte de Wallencourt in the Gerd trenches up to the Flores trenches. The 47th Division attacked with the 140th Brigade to capture Snack Trench along the east slope of a dip towards Wallencourt, about 500 yards, 460 meters, forward and halfway to the Butte. The 1/8th London on the right was stopped by a huge volume of machine gun fire, as were the 1/15th and 1/7th London, who were to pass through the 1/8th London and could only establish outposts near the Labarque Road. In touch with the 41st Division, the 23rd Division attacked on the right with the 12th DLI of the 68th Brigade E, supported by a tank which attacked the German garrison in the Tangle and then turned left up the sunken road from Eaucourt to Les Sars, until hit by a shell. The 12th DLI was checked by machine gun fire down the road from the village, but the 9th Green Howards of the 69th Brigade got into the southwest end. In the center, the 13th DLI was to capture the rest of the village and attacked at 2:30 p.m. The battalion met the Green Howards at the village crossroads, and after a determined resistance, the German defense collapsed. The 12th DLI had dug in along the sunken road beyond the Tangle and pushed posts forward on the right flank. The 13th DLI and Green Howards dug posts around the village and prepared to advance on the Butte de Wallencourt, but no reinforcements were available. 20 minutes after 0 hour, the 11th Battalion West Yorkshire Regiment made a frontal attack on Flores support trench north of Les Sars, but was stopped by artillery fire and small arms fire from the left flank. A second attempt succeeded, with bombers attacking along the trench from Les Sars, retreating Germans being shot down by the British infantry and the divisional artillery. The 10th Duke of Wellingtons arrived later, and by dark, the 69th Brigade had occupied the Flores trenches to a point 300 yards, 270 meters, inside the 4th Army boundary. Equals the 8th of October equals. The rain came back during the night, and on the 8th of October, the 4th Army divisions removed casualties and consolidated positions. On the left flank, the 23rd Division attacked again at 4:50 a.m. with the reserve army, 2 companies of the 8th York, and Lanks from the 70th Brigade. Captured the Flores trenches up to the army boundary and occupied an abandoned post 750 yards, 690 meters, northwest of Les Sars. The 47th Division made a night attack on Snack Trench with the 121st of Stone and 122nd London, by crawling forward to rush the trench as the barrage lifted. The trench was entered on the left, but the parties were forced out by fire from the right. The 122nd London set up posts on the Eaucourt-Wallencourt Road and gained touch with the 23rd Division to the west, on the army boundary with the 6th Army. The 56th Division moved back from Rainy Trench northeast of Les Beaufs and most of Spectrum Trench to the north, for a British preparatory bombardment, and then attacked at 3:30 p.m. with the 169th Brigade on the right. The 1/5th London Rifle Brigade captured Hazy Trench, despite losing contact with the French 18th Division on the right, and machine guns concealed in shell holes stopped the 19th London and the 1/3 Road London. 167th Brigade advance on Dewdrop and Spectrum trenches. After dark, the battalions were withdrawn to the start line and German troops occupied Rainy Trench unopposed. Late on the 8th of October, Rawlinson ordered another attack, once 15th Corps had reached its objectives, anticipated to be by the 12th of October, when the 6th Army expected to have captured Sailly-Salise to the southeast. The rain stopped early on the 9th of October, and from 10 to 11 October, the weather was fine, but the state of the ground made divisional reliefs slow and laborious. From 8 to 11 October, the 14th Corps replaced the 56th and 20th Divisions with the 4th Division, Major General W. Lambton, and the 6th Division, Major General Charles Ross. In 15th Corps, the 41st Division was replaced by the 30th Division, Major General J. S. M. Shea, and the 9th Division, Major General William Furse, and 15th Division, Major General Frederick McCracken, took over from the 47th and 23rd Divisions in 3rd Corps. The new division had little time to study the ground or dig assembly trenches, and Furse was refused a 48-hour postponement. The Royal Flying Corps, RFC, attempted to get new photographs of the German defences, but the light was too poor for much to be achieved. The 12th of October 0 hour was 2:05 p.m. and the 4th Division on the right of 14th Corps attacked with the 10th Brigade next to the French 18th Division. 9th Corps, the 1st Royal Warwicks, advanced 500 yards, 460 meters, and dug Antelope Trench south of Hazy Trench, in touch with the French, and repulsed a counterattack in the evening. The battalion advance was repulsed at Rainy and Dewdrop Trenches northeast of Les Beaufs, along with the 1st Royal Irish Fusiliers further to the left. On the left of the division, the 12th Brigade attacked Spectrum Trench after a Stokes mortar bombardment, and parties of the 2nd Duke of Wellington's got into the trench and linked with the 2nd Lancashire Fusiliers in the north end of the trench. An attempt by groups from both battalions to attack over the spur to Zenith Trench was repulsed. In the 6th Division area north of the Le Transloy Road, the 2nd York and Lancaster, on the right of the 16th Brigade, was also repulsed in front of Zenith Trench. In the 71st Brigade area to the left, the 9th Suffolk inner salient formed by Misty and the east end of Cloudy Trench were not to advance. And in the 18th Brigade on the left of the division, the 1st West Yorks attacked Mile Trench and the rest of Cloudy Trench by a frontal attack and a flank attack by bombers, which was repulsed. The 14th DLI on the left flank got into Rainbow Trench and bombed dugouts along the sunken Boulogne-Court Road, to link with the 1st West Yorks. On the left of the road, the 14th DLI gained touch with the 88th Brigade detached from the 29th Division to the 12th Division on the right of 15th Corps, the Royal Newfoundland Regiment on the right and the 1st Essex on the left. Captured part of Hill Trench and the extension of Rainbow Trench, and then part of the 1st Essex. Pressed on to Grease Trench but were ordered back to the start line at 5:30 p.m. after the 35th Brigade on the left had not got forward. The Newfoundlanders held on at Hill Trench, bombed further up and took part of the 1st Essex objective. In the 35th Brigade attack, the 7th Suffolk and the 7th Norfolk tried to cut through barbed wire by hand opposite Bayonet Trench against mass small arms fire, after which the survivors were pinned down until dark and then retreated. The 30th Division attacked on the left of 15th Corps with the 2nd Royal Scots Fusiliers and the 17th Manchester of the 90th Brigade. The Royal Scots managed only to advance 150 yards, 140 meters, into machine gun fire and then withdrew as some parties of the 17th Manchester got into Bayonet Trench before retiring. On the left of the division, the 89th Brigade attacked on the right with the 2nd Bedfordshire which tried to bomb up the Gerd trenches but were only able to take a small length of Bight trench. On the left, the 7th King's Liverpool was stopped by enfilade fire from the northwest, the preliminary bombardment having failed to suppress the German machine guns, which were dispersed over a wide area. In the 3rd Corps area, the 9th Division on the right had to capture Snack Trench, then the Butte-Wallencourt in the Wallencourt line. The tail ran back from Snack Trench to the Butte and the Pimple at the west end of Snack Trench, with the help of enfilade fire from the 15th Division to the left. Littlewood and the Butte were bombarded with smoke by 4 Special Company Re. In the 26th Brigade on the right, the 7th Seaforth Highlanders was caught by machine gun fire as soon as it attacked them, with the reinforcement of the 10th Argylls managed only to push on for 200 yards, 182 meters, and dig in during the night. On the left flank, the 1st South African Brigade attacked with the 2nd Regiment followed by the 4th Regiment, which were held up by long-range machine gun fire and lost direction in the smoke drifting from the Butte. Parties dug in halfway to Snack Trench and some stayed in no man's land until the following morning. 14 to 17 October equals. After the poor results of the attack on the 12th of October, Rawlinson concluded that the weather delays had enabled the defenders to recover and that a deliberate attack after methodical bombardment was necessary before another attack on the 18th of October. On the 13th of October, he issued an operation order in which he stressed the necessity of improving routes to the front line and the preparation of good assembly trenches parallel to the German defences. A steady bombardment was to begin immediately, and 14th Corps was warned to capture Zenith, Mild and the rest of Cloudy trenches before the general attack. 15th Corps was to capture the Gerd lines southeast of the Eaucourt-le-Bac Road, and Snack Trench was to be captured by 3rd Corps. All by night attacks supported by tanks, where practical. On the 14th of October, the 14th Corps attempted a surprise attack at 6:30 p.m. with the 2nd C-5ths of the 4th Division, which got into Rainy Trench and gun pits south of Dewdrop Trench and were then forced out by a counterattack. The 2nd Royal Dublin Fusiliers tried to capture gun pits in front of Hazy Trench at the same time, and were also repulsed. In the 12th Brigade, the 1st King's Own tried to bomb down Spectrum Trench to Dewdrop Trench in the evenings of 14 and the 15th of October, and in a pre-dawn attack on the 15th of October, the 2nd Sherwood Foresters in the 6th Division took the gun pits in front of the British-held section of Cloudy Trench and took several prisoners. On the left of the division, the 11th Essex overran Mild Trench and bombed up the Boulencourt Road, before being forced back by a counter-attack. In the 3rd Corps area, the 3rd South African Regiment attacked after dark on the 14th of October, captured the Pimple and 80 yards, 73 meters, of Snack Trench. The rain gradually abated and the 17th of October began fair but clouded over, and rain fell again during the night. The British bombardment had continued as planned, but the German artillery reply was vigorous, leading up to 0 hour at 3:40 am. On the 18th of October, 18 to 20 October equals. On most of the brigade fronts, assembly positions had been marked with white tape and compass bearings taken of the direction to the objectives, but at 0 hour, the British positions were flooded. The moon was obscured by low clouds. Troops slipped and fell in the mud and weapons were clogged, leaving only hand grenades and bayonets to fight with. On the right, the 4th Division attacked with the 11th Brigade to take Frosty, Hazy, Rainy and Dewdrop trenches, while in the French sector the attack began at 11:45 am. groups of the 1st Rifle Brigade reached the gun pits before Hazy Trench and were forced back. The 1st East Lancs were forced under cover in front of Dewdrop Trench by the fire of hidden machine guns. The 1st King's Own of the 12th Brigade and the German defenders mutually attacked and counter-attacked around Spectrum Trench, and then the King's Own bombed along Spectrum for 70 yards 64 meters towards Dewdrop Trench. In the 6th Division, the 9th Norfolk attacked mild and cloudy trenches but was bombarded before 0 hour and moved so slowly through mud that it lost the barrage. The battalion captured the northwest end of Mild Trench and then repulsed a counterattack as dark fell. After dark on the 19th of October, a platoon of the 1st Somerset Light Infantry found Frosty Trench unoccupied and defeated a counterattack. The 15th Corps made flank attacks because the centre faced a dip either side of the Floers-Elway Road. The 12th Division on the right attacked Grease Trench with the 2nd Hampshire and 4th Worcester Battalions and the southeast end of Bayonet Trench with the 9th Essex Battalion from the 35th Brigade. The 2nd Hampshire and the 4th Worcester took Grease Trench with few losses but then had many casualties trying to press on. The Worcesters blocked Hilt Trench on the left after the 9th Essex were not able to advance, except for one company which got into Bayonet Trench and was then bombed out by counter-attacks from the flanks. On the left of the 30th Division, the 2nd Green Howards almost reached the west end of Bayonet Trench before being stopped by showers of hand grenades. Parties bombed up part of Bite Trench, but reinforcements were stopped from moving up by the mud. On the left, the 18th Kings and 2nd Wiltshire attacked the gird lines and found uncut wire on the right and enfiladed from the left, most of the 2nd Wiltshire being killed. 2 tanks had been brought up to Floers in case the night attacks failed, and during a lull at 8:00 am, one bogged in mud and the other drove to the end of Gird Trench and machine-gunned it for 20 minutes. Killing many Germans who ran back to the northeast. The commander signaled the infantry to move up, but the infantry were so disorganized and exhausted that none moved. The tank drove along Gird Trench to the Labuck Road and then returned. 3rd Corps attacked Snag Trench again as smoke and lacrimatory bombs were fired from the 15th Division front to try to suppress German fire from the butte and from Wallencourt village. The 5th Cameron Highlanders on the right of the 9th Division took a trench from the Labuck Road to 200 yards, 182 meters, from the nose, the junction of Snag Trench and the tail, and met some of the 2nd Wiltshire. A German counter-attack on the right got a footing in the trench, until another attack after dark drove them back, and on the left 2 companies of the 1st South African Regiment overran Snag Trench, pressed on and were shot down by machine gun fire from the butte. Apart from a small group who got into Snag Trench next to the Camerons. At dawn the South Africans tried to bomb along Snag from the Pimple and at 5:45 p.m. attacked from both flanks. The South Africans managed to advance, leaving the Germans occupying only 100 yards, 91 meters, of the trench around the nose as night fell. The rain continued during the 19th of October. At dawn, German parties accompanied by a Flammenwerfer detachment advanced along the tail to attack eastwards along Snag Trench. The South Africans retreated towards the 8th Black Watch, which had relieved the Camerons as a counterattack on the right flank was repulsed. British artillery maintained the bombardment on the nose and tail areas, but the South African Brigade was too exhausted to attack again, and after dark the 27th Brigade took over all the 9th Division front, struggling through mud and water. The 6th King's Own Scottish Borderers, KOSB, was considered fit to attack at 4:00 p. m. On the 20th of October, and in confused fighting, captured, lost and retook the nose. By dark, the 6th KOSB had control of Snag Trench, and some Royal Scots had advanced along 250 yards, 230 meters, of the tail. German 1st and 2nd Armies. 1 to 3 October equals. In the early autumn, many German divisions which had fought earlier on the Somme were brought back for a second period, in which their performance was considered inferior, despite replacements being of good quality because of the lack of experienced NCOs and junior officers. The 6th Bavarian Reserve Division took over the defences of Eaucourt-l'Abbaye, on the 26th of September, and lost many casualties to artillery fire. On the 1st of October, prisoners taken from Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 21, BRIR 21, of the division said that Brandbomben, Livens projectors, had caused much damage. BRIR 21 recorded the capture of the 2 and 3 Battalion headquarters and that attempts to counterattack failed. The 2 Battalion, BRIR 17, counter-attacked southeast down the Floors trenches past 2 bogged-down tanks, but Eaucourt was considered lost during the afternoon. The 3 Battalion, BRIR 17, reassembled on the Eaucourt-Les Road on the 2nd of October and was joined by 3 Battalion, BRIR 16 and parties of Infantry Regiment 362 of the 4th Ersatz Division garrisoned the village. On the night of 2/3 October, BRIR 21 was relieved near Eaucourt by BRIR 16, but the fresh troops were unable to prevent the loss of Eaucourt. The infantry were ground down by the weather conditions and British attacks. The commander of I Battalion, BRIR 16, reported that battlefield conditions were extraordinary, with cold food and artillery fire causing severe problems, particularly short shooting by German guns. The high number of casualties had depressed morale, made worse by the lack of opportunity to remove bodies, which were strewn around trenches and tracks. Poor hygiene caused many non-battle casualties, with 25 to 33% of the men having severe diarrhea. The report was sent to the regiment commander, who could only pass it on. By the 3rd of October, the 4th Ersatz Division had relieved the 7th Division west of the Bapaume Road and took over the Bavarian right up to Les Sars. By when BRIR 17 casualties had risen to 1646 men. 7 to 8 October equals. On the night of 6/7 October, Infantry Regiment 68, IR 68, of the 16th Division and Reserve Infantry Regiment 76, RIR 76, of the 17th Reserve Division relieved IR 163 at the Salles. Both regiments having fought against the British on the Somme earlier in the battle. The troops of the 16th Division had spent several days digging part of R2 Stellung by day and night in the rain. After marching 9.3 miles, 15 kilometers, from bivouacs in muddy fields, without means of getting dry, before receiving the order to move forward to the front line. On the 10th of October, another order emphasized that the division would not be relieved for some time and must keep troops back in R.I. Stellung for counterattacks. The front line was hard to define and led IR 68 and RIR 76 to argue over the interregimental boundary. French attacks and artillery fire had already made the southern approach to the village untenable. The troops were encouraged by the evidence of the greater effort in the air being made over the Somme, reporting that the aerial plague was less intense than during their first tour. The 18th Reserve Division relieved the 52nd Reserve Division in late September, and Reserve Infantry Regiment 84 on the left of the division lost 70 prisoners on the 7th of October. The British 20th Division took prisoners from Reserve Infantry Regiment 72, 7th Reserve Division, on the Goudecourt-Boulencourt Road, and Reserve Infantry Regiment 66 to the left. Reserve Infantry Regiments 36 and 72, 7th Reserve Division, lost prisoners at Rainbow Trench. Snag Trench was held by 3 Battalion BRIR 16 of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division. From 7 to 8 October, the British took 528 prisoners from infantry regiments 360, 361, 362 of the 4th Ersatz Division, the I Battalion, Infantry Regiment 360 having been attacked during a relief by 3 Battalion. Infantry Regiment 360. The 47th Division captured 84 prisoners of Reserve Infantry Regiment 31, RIR 31, and 84 of the 18th Reserve Division, RIR 86, had moved left to close a gap made by the French, which moved RIR 31 opposite the British right flank. In the 16th Division area opposite the French, IR 68 and IR 28 made several counter-attacks against French troops who had reached the church in Saley, greatly helped by the German artillery, which inflicted many French losses before the fighting closed to hand. The new tactic of holding the front line with the minimum of men increased the burden on German artillery, which had to commence firing as soon as the French or British attacked, but the extent of Allied artillery fire forced the gunners to rely on flares from the front line instead of telephones. A field gun regiment at the Nerlou-Perron-Moislaines-Temple-à-la-Fosse crossroads covered the defences of Saint-Pierre-Vaast Wood, 5,500 to 6,600 yards. 5,000 to 6,000 meters away from open positions vulnerable to French shelling. The distance from the wood was too great for observed fire, and when shooting from the map, shell dispersion made for a large beaten zone, which was impossible to correct, and guaranteed that some shells fell short onto German positions. Regardless of careful fire control and gun laying, steel was being used instead of brass for shell cases, which caused stoppages, but they still managed to fire 2200-4700 shells per day. The 12th of October equals. The 16th Division at the Salles repulsed several attacks in the morning and then received a bombardment of staggering intensity before the French attacked again. Infantry Regiment 68 lost another 102 casualties but held on with IR 76, which was relieved that night. Liaison between the Bavarians and the 16th Division was poor, and both regiments argued about responsibility for a gap between them. The companies of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division on the Bapaume-Albert Road opposite the British were down to about 35 men each, all suffering from dysentery, exhaustion, hunger and exposure, to hold an area of 1,100 by 1,600 yards, 1,000 meters times 1,500 meters. Reserve Infantry Regiment 31 recorded many losses at Zenith Trench. The 19th Reserve Division had relieved the 7th Reserve Division, and on the right the 6th Division had moved up and taken over the left of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division opposite the 3rd Corps of the British 4th Army. Reserve Infantry Regiment 92 of the 19th Reserve Division was opposite the left of the British 6th Division. About 150 prisoners were taken from Infantry Regiment 64 of the 6th Division during the loss of Hilt Trench, the left flank being rolled up. A counterattack stopped the British advance, but contact with Reserve Infantry Regiment 92 of the 19th Reserve Division on the left was lost. Infantry Regiment 24 of the 6th Division and parts of Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiments 16 and 21 of the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division were opposite the 30th Division. Snag Trench was held by Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 20. After the fighting on 12 October, the 2nd Bavarian Division relieved the 18th Reserve Division. The 40th Division relieved the 6th Bavarian Reserve Division on the night of 12–13 October, and the 24th Division took over from the 4th Ersatz Division. French attacks were made in the afternoons after artillery bombardments, and on 14 October, IR-68 found that half its casualties had been caused by German artillery firing short. The dispute about regimental boundaries continued, and on 15 October the French found the gap and got into Saint-Lizel. Several determined counterattacks were made to eject them, but by the 17th of October the counterattacks had failed. The Bavarians blamed the Prussians of IR-68, which after the war took 58 pages of the regimental history to explain that the position had been compromised all along, that German artillery had bombarded them constantly, tactical communication had been lost, and orders could not be related to the ground. 18 to 20 October equals. The rest of the Saint-Lizels had been held, and the German hold on Saint-Pierre-Vaast would stop the French from rolling up the German defences from north to south. The 4th Division took prisoners from Bavarian Infantry Regiment 15 of the 2nd Bavarian Division, and the 2 Battalion. Bavarian Infantry Regiment 15 had 50% casualties. Most of Reserve Infantry Regiment 92 was captured, and Infantry Regiment 64 of the 6th Division lost 200 men of the I Battalion. Infantry Regiment 181 of the 40th Division found that the mud reduced the effect of the British bombardment, and the infantry were unable to make a quick advance. Prisoners were taken from I and 2 battalions. Infantry Regiment 104 at Snag Trench and the 3 Battalion conducted a counter-attack. On 19 October, the Storm Detachment of the 40th Division counter-attacked in 2 columns with flamethrowers, a machine gun section, and the best men of I Battalion. Infantry Regiment 104. The advance of the left column was halted by one of the flamethrowers exploding. Most of the survivors of Infantry Regiment 104 were relieved by 3 Battalion. Infantry Regiment 134. The trenches of Infantry Regiment 104 were smashed by artillery fire, and the troops were withdrawn. According to the new policy of avoiding pointless casualties by abandoning outposts of no tactical value, equals the 24th of October equals. Rupprecht wrote in his diary that the recapture of the north end of Sailly was needed to regain artillery observation, but that this would have to wait for the arrival of the 15th Corps. General Berthold von Deimling, with the 30th and 39th Divisions below, and the commander of the 9th Reserve Corps, General Max von Bern, had agreed that the power of resistance of the Germans on the Somme was much reduced, and that officer casualties meant that it could not be increased. The French First Offensive Battle of Verdun, the 20th of October, the 2nd of November, temporarily stopped the flow of reinforcements to the Somme front, but substantial artillery and air reinforcements were already on the Somme. The decline in the power of the Anglo-French artillery, caused by poor weather and Luftstreitkraft attacks on artillery observation machines, enabled the German infantry to mount a costly but successful defense, helped by the knowledge that the onset of winter would end the battle. Air operations. By October, the Germans had managed to assemble about 333 aircraft in 23 squadrons from Peronne to Hanneskamps, 17 Feldfliegerabteilungen with about 100 reconnaissance aircraft, 13 artillery flights, Artilleriefliegerabteilungen, with about 53 aircraft, 3 bomber fighter squadrons, Kampfgeschwader, and 2 independent flights with about 140 aeroplanes to escort them, mainly of C-type, 2-seater, armed biplanes and 3 fighter squadrons. Jagdstaffel, with about 45 aircraft. Jagdstaffel II, Jaster II, Hauptmann Oswald Boelk, had been established at Bertincourt on the 27th of August and on the 16th of September received new Albatros D, I and D, 2 fighters. The concentration of aircraft, particularly the superior fighters, enabled the Germans to challenge Anglo-French air superiority, at least for short periods. Barrage flights to stop aircraft crossing the German lines were ended and airmen were ordered over the Anglo-French lines instead, to fight through to their objectives in large formations. Aircraft with more powerful engines that could climb higher than British fighters had arrived in August and managed to photograph all of the battlefield. More balloon units arrived, which eventually had 50 balloons, half of those on the Western Front, and all of the light motorized anti-aircraft guns in the army were sent to the Somme. Methodical observation of artillery fire and the reforms introduced by Gallwitz made bombardments more efficient, and German infantry began to recover confidence in the air arm. On the 6th of October, the Imperial German Flying Corps, Fliegertruppen des Deutschen Kaiserreiches, was reformed as the Luftstreitkraft. Die Fliegertruppe, German Air Force, equals 1 to 11 October equals. During September, the monthly wastage, losses from all causes, in RFC fighters and long-range reconnaissance aircraft was 75%, and the new faster, more maneuverable German fighters coming into service threatened Anglo-French air superiority on the Somme. At 3:00 p.m. on the 1st of October, observers of 34 Squadron and 3 Squadron watched the attack by 3rd Corps and the New Zealand Division of 15th Corps on Eaucourt l'Abbaye and the defences either side. On a 3,000-yard (2,700 meters) front, the attack on Eaucourt failed, but on the rest of the attack front the infantry followed a good barrage onto their objectives and were also able to send patrols into Le Sars. The commander of 34 Squadron, Major J. A. Chamier, reported that, at 3:15 p.m., the steady bombardment changed into a most magnificent barrage. The barrage appeared to be the most perfect wall of fire in which it was inconceivable that anything could live. The 50th Division were seen to spread out from the sapheads and forming up trenches and advance close up under the barrage, apparently some 50 yards, 46 meters, away from it. They appeared to capture their objective very rapidly and with practically no losses while crossing the open. To sum up, the most startling feature of the operations as viewed from the air was 1. The extraordinary volume of fire of our barrage and the straight line kept by it. 2. The apparent ease with which the attack succeeded where troops were enabled to go forward close under it. 3. The promiscuous character and comparative lack of volume of the enemy's counter-barrage. 2nd Corps of the Reserve Army on the left of 3rd Corps had attacked at 3:00 p.m. but was repulsed by a huge amount of German artillery fire and frequent counter-attacks. In 3 hours, RFC observers sent down 67 zone calls to the 2nd Corps counter-battery group and 39 batteries were reported by observers in balloons. On the 2nd of October, continuous rain began and 8 German aircraft flew low over the British lines between Morval and Les Beaufs, where one was shot down by ground fire, while the British aircraft were on the ground. On the 6th of October, German aircraft had reconnoitred and several strafe troops of 15th Corps The Fourth Army attacked again on the 7th of October in dull and windy weather, and the German airmen returned to the British artillery lines near Flers and Goudecourt and directed German counter-battery fire onto the British guns. British fighter pilots from 4 Brigade were sent to the scene, but the Germans had gone by the time they arrived. RFC observers watched the British attack, but the strong westerly wind made their aircraft appear to be stationary in the air. When the pilots turned into the wind to allow the observers to study the ground, German infantry fired on the aircraft. 2 crew were wounded and several aircraft had to be flown back to make emergency landings. Rawlinson complained at the quality of the reconnaissance reports, which, with the lack of observation during the rain delays before the attack, led to the British bombardments and barrages being inaccurate, which contributed to the failure of the Fourth Army except east of Goudecourt and at Les Sars. The German counter-barrage had been prompt and accurate, helped by the success of the reconnaissance flights before the attack. On the 9th of October, German aircraft bombed the rear areas of 3rd Corps at 11:20 p.m., and within minutes 4 pilots from 18 Squadron and 21 Squadron were dispatched to raid illuminated aerodromes from which the bombers had come, but none were seen. Cambrai station and villages around Bapaume were bombed instead. A train hit earlier by 13 Squadron, which had also bombed Bapaume and Quaillon stations, was hit again. Next day the weather improved and every British offensive patrol was attacked. Sopwith 1.5 Strutters from 70 Squadron fought 7 German fighters over their airfield at Villers-Cotterêts, and other British aircraft joined him but found it impossible to keep the German aircraft in their sights because of their maneuverability. The German aircraft eventually flew away after 1 aeroplane each was shot down. 3 more German aircraft were lost and a British aircraft was shot down into the British lines near Morval, from which the crew escaped. Another aeroplane force landed at Pozières and a 23 Squadron Fe-2B crashed into a shell hole with a dead pilot. During the night, 18, 19 and 13 squadrons bombed Cambrai and Vitry stations and the aerodrome at Douai. 12 to 21 October On the 12th of October, the Fourth Army attack was repulsed except near Goudecourt, partly because of a lack of air observation, which led to an inadequate preparatory bombardment. The weather remained bad until the 16th of October when 3 aircraft of 18 Squadron bombed Cambrai station, one of which was shot down as they returned. German aircraft also bombed the airfield of 9 Squadron, wounding 2 ground staff and destroying 1 aeroplane and damaged another. 7 B-12s of 19 Squadron bombed Hermes station and the airfield in the morning, then Havrincourt and Rouillancourt in the afternoon, losing 2 aircraft. The reconnaissance and artillery observation aircraft of IV and V brigades flew intensively and were attacked by German fighters. A 15 Squadron aircraft was attacked by 5 fighters near Eboutin and shot down, and another aircraft was attacked over Wallencourt and returned with the wounded observer. 4 brigade offensive patrols lost 1 aircraft and had 1 pilot wounded, shooting down 3 German aircraft. Another was shot down by a 5 brigade offensive patrol. The better weather continued on the 17th of October and a supply dump was blown up at Bapaume station. A reconnaissance by 3rd Army aircraft at the north end of the Somme front met 20 German fighters and 2 aircraft were shot down by each side. A British aircraft was driven down by German fighters and 2 German aircraft were forced down by 24 Squadron near Villers-Cotterêts. Rain and sleet then stopped flying for 2 days. On the 20th of October, aircraft of 11 Squadron on photographic reconnaissance near Douai were attacked by Jaster II. which shot down 2 aircraft and damaged 2 more. 33 German aircraft crossed the British front line and made many attacks on British aircraft. 3 German aircraft were shot down and 17 claimed damaged. German night bombers attacked Curie, Corby and Longo, where an ammunition wagon was blown up. British aircraft attacked Vieques-LU in Peronne. Queant Station was bombed by 30 aircraft and escorts and 1 bomber WSA shot down. An escorting Nieuport 17 turned back after the bombers reached British lines and was forced down in a dogfight with a faster German aircraft. On other parts of the Somme front 2 German aircraft were shot down, 3 damaged and 10 driven down. 22 October to November . On the 22nd of October there were many sorties by German flyers. 6 aircraft attacked a 1.5 strutter of 45 Squadron and wounded the observer, who shot 1 down. Later in the day, 345 Squadron aircraft were shot down and in F.E. 2B shot down 1 aircraft and damaged another, before the observer was mortally wounded. 4 British aircraft were shot down beyond German lines. During the 23rd of October, 2 Reserve Army artillery observation aeroplanes were shot down by Jasta II. On the 26th of October, despite poor weather, both sides flew mini sorties. A fight between 5 Echo DH-2s of 24 Squadron and 20 Halberstadt D.IIs was indecisive, but later in the day, 8 aircraft led by Boelk shot down 1 British observation aircraft, forced down 2 more and a British fighter which intervened. 1 German fighter was then shot down when a formation of British fighters from 32 Squadron turned up. Boelk was killed on the 28th of October, when he collided with a German aircraft during an attack on 2 British fighters, which returned safely. For the rest of the Battle of the Somme, both sides flew in rain, mist, sleet and westerly gales, often at dangerously low heights, to direct artillery and attack troops with guns and bombs. The 3rd of November was a clear day and German aircraft shot down 5 British aircraft. On the night of the 6th of November, German night bombers hit an ammunition train near Cerisy, which exploded next to a cage for German prisoners of war and devastated the area. Better weather came on the 8th of November and many German aircraft made ground attacks on British troops, a tactic which the Luftstreitkräfte began to incorporate systematically into its defensive operations. The British attempted to divert German attention next day, with bombing raids on Arleux and Vrocourt. The raid on Vrocourt by 12 bombers and 14 escorts became the biggest airfight of the war, when approximately 30 German aircraft attacked the formation as it crossed the front lines. Most of the bombs were dropped over the target, but 6 British aircraft were shot down and 3 German aircraft were claimed. 3 more British aircraft were shot down later in the day. 1 pilot was killed, 1 wounded and an observer were wounded in aircraft which returned. The railway station at Vitry and German airfields at Bissy, Vieques-LU and Vierre were attacked after dark, while German night bombers attacked the airfield at Laviville. The British attacked Valenciennes aerodrome next morning, where 5 parked aircraft, hangars and sheds were bombed. Next day, German air operations were less extensive. 3 aircraft were shot down and 3 damaged for the loss of 1 British aeroplane. Naval 8 drove down 2 German aircraft on the 10th of November and overnight 18 Squadron retaliated for the attack on their airfield at Laviville by bombing Valenciennes, Vieques-LU. Transport on the Bapaume Road, balloon sheds, a train near St. Leger and a second train which was set on fire. A German headquarters at Havrincourt Château and Douai Aerodrome were also attacked. German bombers attacked Amiens station and returned on the night of 10–11 November, when one aircraft was forced down with engine trouble and the crew captured. Flank operations equals 10th Army equals. The 10th Army attacked from 10 to 11, 14 and 21 to 22 October during the Battle of Le Transloy. After being reinforced by the 21st Corps, General Paul Maistre, and the 2nd Colonial Corps, General E. Blondlat, on 10 October the army attacked on a 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers, front in the center of the army area towards Pressoir, Ablaincourt and Fresnes. The French captured the German second position around Ablaincourt and took about 1,400 prisoners. But south of Estrées, the attack by the 51st Division on Chalons was contained in Boisfort to the northwest. On 14 October, an attack by the 10th Colonial Division and two other divisions on the left flank, next to the 6th Army boundary, captured the trenches opposite and took about 1,000 prisoners. The French then paused to consolidate the ground around Ablaincourt, which had turned into a vast lake of mud, and repulsed several German counter-attacks. The army began preparations for an attack later in October to capture the Butte des Fresnes and cut the Chalons-Péronne railway, but the weather, the state of the ground, exhaustion of the infantry and the increased powers of resistance of the German Second Army slowed the French advance. The 10th Army had failed to advance on the northern flank against Barlou in the 6th Army area, where the 33rd Corps on both sides of the Somme had attacked again in the south on 18 October, to counter German mining and improve the line from La Maisonnette north to Biaches. An attack to clear the approaches to the higher ground on which lay Villers-Carbonel and Fresnes to the southeast was forestalled on 29 October, when the Germans bombarded La Maisonnette for 8 hours with high explosive gas and lacrymatory shell, and then the 206th Division attacked with Infantry Regiment 359. A battalion of the 97th Infantry Regiment was overrun and 450 prisoners taken, which left a gap in the French line for several days, and the attack on Barlou had to be cancelled. On the right, southern flank of the army, the 51st Division was unable to advance further in Boisfort on the 11th of October. During the night, a counterattack by German storm troops and a flamethrower detachment destroyed a battalion of the 25th Regiment, and a French attack on the 21st of October began a period of local attacks and counter-attacks which lasted into November. 6th Army equals. The 6th Army attacked on 7, 12 to 13, 15 and the 18th of October. Opposite the 6th Army, Auerstellung, the German 4th position, ran along a dip at the top of the shallow valley between the Seillisels and Le Transloy, in front of which, the sunken road from Le Transloy to the Morval-Seillisel road, known as Bannisker and Tours trenches, had also been fortified. On the right flank of the attack, the Seillisels were covered by the Prilip to Ports de Ver and Négartin line just east of Rancourt, which met the west end of St. Pierre Vaast Wood at Roos Trench and the Carlsbad, Teplitz and Berlin trenches about 2,200 yards, 2,000 meters, further back. A strong point around Bois Tripot and Château Sailly-Seillisel covered the southern approaches to the villages. The villages were bombarded by super-heavy 270 mm, 280 mm and 370 mm mortars ready for the attack on 7 October at the same time as the 4th Army attacked to the north. The 7th of October. In the center, the 1st Corps, General Adolphe Guillaumat, captured the Prilip to Ports de Ver to Négartin line in early October, and on 7 October, the 40th Division captured Teplitz in Berlin trenches. formed a flank on the southwest fringe of St. Pierre Vaast Wood and gained a small part of Roos Trench. Later lost. The 56th Division to the left managed to advance 1,300 yards, 1,200 meters, up the slope west of the Saale-Isles, captured Carlsbad Trench and gained a footing in the Bois-Tripot strongpoint beyond, which gave the French observation of the ground towards the Péronne-Bapaume road and the Saale-Isles. The attack was the most successful on the north side of the Somme but fell far short of Rocquigny. And on the left flank 1st Corps, which had been in the line since August, was relieved by the fresh 9th Corps. General H. F. A. Pentel, ready for the next attack on the 12th of October. On the right flank, the attack of the 33rd Corps. General A. Nudent, south of Bouchat-Vannes from 6 to 7 October, failed due to an ineffective bombardment and offensive operations were suspended for the winter. 12 to 18 October. In the second week of October, the 32nd Corps, General H. M. Berthelot until the 16th of October, then General M. E. Debony, took over the right flank of 1st Corps, and on the 12th of October, the Corps got into Saale-Isles but was forced out by German counter-attacks. On the 15th of October, the 66th Division exploited a crushing bombardment to capture the remainder of Bois-Tripot, Chateau Saale-Isles, and infiltrated between Prussian and Bavarian positions with the 152nd Infantry Regiment and the 68th Battalion Chasseurs Alpins, and then spent 6 days in hand-to-hand fighting in the ruins. The 94th Infantry Regiment of the 66th Division held on against several German counter-attacks around the Péronne-Bapaume and Saale-Isles to Moislaines Crossroads up to the 29th of October. On the right flank, the 32nd Corps Chasseurs gained a foothold in Roos Trench, but more attacks to capture the east side of Saale-Isles were postponed because of bad weather until the 5th of November and took until 12 November to complete. The 18th Division of 9th Corps attack on Bukovina Trench failed, as did several later attacks, and Fayol sacked Pentel, despite the careful training he had given the Corps before it entered the line. The 18th Division reported afterwards that ground observation posts had only a partial view over the trench. Air observation was limited by frequent fog, rain and high winds. The French approach was up a 2,200 yards, 2,000 meters, slope, full of shell craters and mud dotted with hidden machine gun nests, dominated by German artillery and observation aircraft. French light machine guns jammed and the infantry struggled through knee-high mud. On the 17th of October, an attack on Baniska Trench failed when the French barrage fell short onto the 32nd Infantry Regiment as it waited for 0 hour in an advanced jumping-off trench. The German counter-bombardment caught the support waves in the French front line, and the advanced troops were caught in crossfire from machine gun nests set up in front of Baniska Trench. The troops furthest forward were forced under cover short of the trench, and those on the flanks were unable to advance, which left the 32nd Infantry Regiment in a salient and bombarded by their artillery again, losing 130 casualties in the attack. Baniska Trench was eventually captured by the 152nd Division. General Andry, on the 1st of November, after Fayol overruled Andry and insisted on an attack, which apparently surprised the Germans, who did think that one could occur in such abysmal conditions. Reserve Army equals. The Reserve Army, renamed Fifth Army on the 29th of October, continued its attacks from Courcelette near the Albert-Bapaume Road, west to Thiepval on Bazentin Ridge. The Reserve Army attacked on 1/8 21 and the 25th of October. Many smaller attacks were also made between frequent rainstorms, which turned the ground and roads into rivers of mud and grounded aircraft. German forces at the east end of Stauffenriegel, Regina Trench, and in the remaining parts of Schwabenfeste, Schwaben Redoubt, to the north and Stuff Redoubt, Stauffenfeste, northeast of Thiepval, fought a costly defensive battle, but Stuff Redoubt was captured on the 9th of October and the last German position in Schwaben Redoubt fell on the 14th of October, exposing German positions in the Ancre Valley to British ground observation. A retreat up the Ancre Valley was contemplated by Ludendorff and Rupprecht but rejected, due to the lack of better defensive positions further back, in favor of counter-attacks desired by below the 1st Army commander. Gallwitz noted in early October that so many of his units had been transferred north of the Somme that he had only one fresh regiment left in reserve. The German counterattacks were costly failures, and by the 21st of October, the British had advanced 500 yards, 460 meters, and taken all but the last German foothold in the eastern part of Stauffenriegel, Regina Trench. From the 29th of October to the 9th of November, British attacks were postponed due to rain and fog. Aftermath. Analysis. In 1938, Wilfred Miles, the British official historian, wrote that by the 12th of October, the Germans were used to attacks in the afternoon and that British battalions were at half strength with only 400 men, composed of many poorly trained recruits, lacking the advantage of air observation for reconnaissance and artillery observation in the poor weather. The infantry had struggled to advance towards German defences protected by machine guns, which had been moved back to concealed positions beyond the depth of the British barrages. To sweep the attack front from long range, Rawlinson decided that the German defences would have to be subjected to a methodical bombardment, and that the infantry must prepare more routes of supply from the rear and dig assembly trenches parallel to their objectives. Cavan suggested beginning a creeping barrage just beyond objectives and firing lots of smoke shells to hamper German observation, but none were available. By mid-October, air reconnaissance was impossible because of rain and mist, and artillery observation could not be conducted on any great scale. Shell bursts were smothered in guns too worn for accurate fire and sank into mud. The supply of ammunition was slowed by the condition of the ground and German bombardments. After the results of the attack on the 18th of November were known, the scope of the offensive was reduced and then washed out by more rain until the 3rd of November. Cavan objected to making more attacks on Le Transloy, except from the south, having already lost 5,320 casualties. Rawlinson and then Haig had agreed to stop the attack, but then agreed when the French insisted on an attack by the 6th Army. The 14th Corps was ordered to make a local attack to the east and northeast of Lesbos, and that only a general pressure would be exerted on the rest of the 4th Army front. On the 6th of November, attacks were only to be made to stop the Germans from moving troops from the Western Front and to support the attacks of the 6th Army. In 1995, Simpson wrote that the inability of the British artillery adequately to respond to the changes of German tactics may have been caused by the supply difficulties in October, when the gunners lacked the ammunition to extend creeping barrages all the way to the far side of German defences. Guns were worn out. Ammunition had three types of propellant with inconsistent characteristics. All the ammunition was damp, and corrections for atmospheric conditions were insufficient to regain accuracy. Without observation of targets or information on the fall of shot from artillery observation aircraft. In 2001, Simpson described the process of forming plans by the Fourth Army headquarters to be one of consultation and negotiation with corps commanders, provided that decisions were compatible with the corps artillery plan, which was derived from the army plan. Corps then set boundaries and let divisional commanders have discretion within them. By October, corps headquarters were aware of the importance of passing information from contact patrol aircraft and other sources forward to divisions, the corps headquarters developing into information clearinghouses by the end of the battle. In 2003, Sheffield described the tactical conditions on the Fourth Army front in similar terms to that of Wilfred Miles, the official historian, and that attacks continued in mud, which slowed movement to a crawl, and in which had taken 10 hours to move an Australian brigadier to a dressing station. Charles Bean, the Australian official historian, called the conditions the worst ever known to the 1st A.I.F. Quote, First Australian Imperial Force. Sheffield wrote that Haig was in a coalition straitjacket with the French as the senior partners, which other writers and historians had underestimated. Joffre had wanted another offensive towards Bertincourt, Bapaume and Achit-le-Grand, and the Sixth Army continued its attack, which Haig felt bound to support. Sheffield wrote that Philpott's view that Haig continued the offensive, in the broader interests of the alliance, was correct. In 2011, Sheffield wrote that the new German defences built behind the third position in the onset of autumn required a series of bite-and-hold attacks, which were beyond the ability of the British to arrange in time to reach open country. In late September, Haig had ordered an ambitious three-army offensive operation toward Cambrai, but despite showing increasing tactical skill and inflicting many losses on the Germans, the territorial gains were miserly. Haig persisted because he believed that attrition was working, the BEF was improving, and that he overestimated the capacity of the armies in a wet and muddy season. The pressure from Joffre to continue was also significant, and Haig wrote sympathetically of Cavern's protest in November, but that the French could not be left in the lurch. In late October, Haig reminded Joffre that although subordinate to French strategy, he retained discretion over the operational and tactical matters of where, when and how. In 2005, Pryor and Wilson wrote that the weather in September had been unusually good with only 2 rainstorms, but that mid-autumn on the Somme was usually much wetter, and that the British would be attacking into a valley, which would require a 5-mile (8.0 kilometers) advance to get beyond. The Fourth Army managed to capture Eaucourt-l'Abbé in early October, but German artillery fire increased in volume, suggesting that a collapse was unlikely. When the weather broke, the next attack had to be postponed until the 7th of October, when 6 British and a French division attacked and mostly failed except at Le Sars, because the lack of air reconnaissance led to an inaccurate bombardment. German reverse-slope defences had disguised new defences, and long-range machine gun fire was not suppressed by the creeping barrage. On the 12th of October, the Fourth Army attacked with 5 divisions and had similar results, with some battalions managing to advance 400 to 500 yards, 370 to 460 meters, but none gaining the first objective, due to the weather hampering air reconnaissance and artillery observation, and because German long-range machine gun fire came from guns dispersed evenly around the battlefield to evade British artillery bombardments. All of the divisions in the Fourth Army were short of infantry after the September battles, and those in early October depleted the infantry further. Even in divisions considered fresh, the comparative failure of the attacks to gain ground was ascribed to lack of surprise, poor observation, the German recovery and long-range machine gun fire. Rawlinson wanted to delay attacks to assure good air support. Different 0 hours and the digging of jumping-off trenches to orientate the infantry in the featureless landscape and greater depth to creeping barrages to hit the German machine guns far to the rear. These tactical requirements were contradicted by the operational and strategic necessity of continuing the battle through the winter, and the attack on the 18th of October went ahead despite the requirements not being met, except for 0 hour being set for 3:40 am, which led to the attack taking place in darkness. Because low cloud obscured the moon, Haig reduced the scope of attacks, but the effort on the 23rd of October was another costly failure. The constant rain confined supply traffic to one road from Longueval to Flers, which was frequently bombarded by German artillery, which made the difficulties of supply much worse. Another attack was ordered for the 5th of November, and Pryor and Wilson describe the representations made by Cavan, the 14th Corps commander, who wrote that he was willing to sacrifice men to support the 6th Army on the right, but that a failure would be no help and could lead to the men losing confidence in the commanders. A local attack on the 3rd of November was another failure, and Cavan insisted that Rawlinson witnessed the conditions at the front. Rawlinson agreed that attacks were futile, which Haig accepted until a meeting with Foch, where he was persuaded to continue to attack. Pryor and Wilson wrote that the attack on the 5th of November was another failure, but smaller, costly. Attacks continued for the rest of the month, despite not improving the tactical situation of the Fourth Army. In 2008, Harris wrote that in late September there had been legitimate grounds for thinking that the German defense of the Somme might collapse. German troops had lost morale and surrendered more willingly and suffered more casualties in September than in any other month. Air reconnaissance had revealed that the Germans were building 3 more defensive lines. R.I.R. 3 Stellungen. But R.I. Stellung in front of Le Transloy was far less formidable than the 3 lines overrun since July. Harris also wrote of the rain and mud, and that the Germans had relieved exhausted divisions during the respite, reinforced the artillery and moved machine guns to the rear, where they were less vulnerable but could fire through barrages at the British infantry. The Fourth Army attacks on 7, 12 and the 18th of October had captured little ground at great cost, against far less formidable defences than earlier in the battle. By the middle of the month, Haig and Rawlinson agreed that the army could not remain in its positions on such low ground through the winter, but that the attacks of 23, 28 and the 29th of October were costly failures, in an even worse morass than earlier in the month. Fresh troops became exhausted just moving up to the front line, and in most of the Fourth Army Division's battalion strengths had fallen from 800 men to about 350. Living knee-deep in mud, eating cold food and soaking wet. Despite reports of the conditions and Cavan's objections, attacks in support of the Sixth Army continued. The British lost another 2,000 casualties for no gain of ground, and the French also had meagre results, which led Foch to accept that little more could be achieved on the Fourth and Sixth Army fronts. The size and frequency of Anglo-French attacks could not be maintained in October and November. The attacks became less powerful and were aimed at limited objectives. The British armies had become more proficient since July, and the French continued to improve, but the wet weather, high winds and shorter days made the delivery of supplies to the front line and the evacuation of wounded extraordinarily difficult. The attacks of the Sixth Army south of the Fourth Army were also postponed because of the weather. French aircraft were grounded and the flow of supplies interrupted. Attacks from 6 to 7 October achieved little, and the offensive south of Bouchavans towards Péronne was abandoned. Next to the British northward attacks, the French continued but to the northeast to capture the Salizals. The Fourth Army attacked a low ridge northwest from Le Transloy to Ligny but achieved little success, trying to advance through a jumble of trenches, derelict artillery positions and strongpoints. New German trenches dug between the Flers and Gerd lines formed tiers of defences to fight from, which due to the constant bombardments became unrecognizable. The Fourth Army slowly advanced into a dip overlooked from higher ground around Le Transloy and Wallencourt and towards the Butte de Wallencourt, from which German observers could see all round. Deliberate attacks on 7, 12, 18 and the 23rd of October and smaller local attacks were quickly forced to ground by German machine gun fire on the 14th and 15th Corps fronts, but 3rd Corps captured Les Sars before being held up around the defences of the Butte. The Sixth Army experienced its worst fighting of the battle to capture the Salizals, attacking on a 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers, in the same conditions as the Fourth Army, with the same results for the same reasons. On the right of the attack, the French had more success and closed up on the southern approach to the villages, but after 7 October this advance also slowed. In the middle of the month the villages were entered but not entirely captured until the 12th of November. The Anglo-French armies made far less progress in October and November, the Salizals and Les Sars being the only notable geographical successes. The German armies endured the same physical conditions but had a much narrower beaten zone between the front line and comparatively undamaged terrain. Mud reduced the effect of Allied artillery. Many shells not exploding are being smothered and clogged weapons being carried over no man's land. British divisions fighting on the Somme for the second time had gained experience, but German divisions had been kept in action for longer and new divisions were committed before they were ready, and both sides had difficulty in replacing losses, and the German army created 15 new divisions in the autumn from garrison troops, older conscript classes, ersatz reservists, the last depot reserves and the 1917 conscript class. The French filled gaps with shirkers, workers being disciplined, and youths of the 1917 class. In the BEF the first conscripts arrived in on the 16th of October. Private Harry Farr was shot as an example. Despite extenuating circumstances, Fayolle judged that the battle should end and that the armies should wait for spring, but in November, protests from senior officers like Havin and the inspection report of Major John Gort were set aside. Haig, Foch and Joffre insisted on continuing despite the appalling conditions to support the battles at Verdun and on the Eastern Front, where the Russians were attacking in Galicia and Romania was being overrun, and the Southern Front, where the Italian army was on the offensive and an attack had begun in Macedonia. Philpott wrote that Allied firepower was still purgatory for the German infantry, and that Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 16 fought on the Somme from 2 to 12 October and was eviscerated, having only 350 infantry left, after suffering 1177 casualties, from which it never recovered. The regiment had been dragged along in the darkness and night, and spewed out in ruins. The increased number of divisions, aircraft, artillery and ammunition sent to the Somme front in September and October reduced the effectiveness Anglo-French attacks in October, but from the 20th of October to the 2nd of November, the French armies at Verdun fought the one-air bataille offensive de Verdun, First Offensive Battle of Verdun, which exploited the depletion of the Fifth Army to support the defense on the Somme. Advanced 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, and recaptured Fort Douaumont on 24 October. Fort Vaux fell on 3 November. The French armies continued small attacks in November along with the British, but from 14 to 16 November, the Germans counter-attacked at Bouchavans, retaking part of the Salles and Rousse Trench. In 2014, Philpott wrote that Foch showed that a well-organized battle could be fought in a manner which was not unduly costly, but that the Allies had not accumulated enough resources to defeat decisively the Germans. In September, Foch had managed to get the four Entente armies on the Somme to make coordinated attacks, which brought the Germans close to collapse. In October, the autumn rain soaked the ground and slowed the tempo of attacks, which resembled the grignotage, nibbling, of late July and August. Such smaller, uncoordinated attacks could depress German morale but not deplete manpower at the rate achieved. In September, the systems of organization and supply to maintain long offensives were not adequate to deliver the vast amounts of food, ammunition and equipment needed by million-man armies. Even with the infrastructure of northern France, a reorganization was begun, using light railways to link railheads to the armies, but this change did not mature until 1917 and became part of a cycle of initiative and response by the belligerents, which continued the battlefield equilibrium. Casualties. The 21st Division lost 4,152 casualties from 16 September to 1 October, and New Zealand Division casualties from 15 September to 4 October were 7,000 men. The 6th Division had 1,863 casualties from 9 to 20 October, and during the month the 4th Division recorded just over 4,000 losses. The 8th Division had about 2,500 casualties from 23 to 29 October, and the 29th Division lost 1,874 men from 11 to 30 October. The 30th Division had casualties of 2,650 men from 11 to 22 October. Mud. Rain during the summer had turned soil to mud, but the heavier autumn rains created a much longer-lasting variety, a mixture of soil and the chalky subsoil, which became liquid, yellow-grey mud, which had extraordinary buoyancy and stuck to everything, covering men and jamming gun mechanisms and rifles. On roads, the mud stuck to wheels and caked the hooves of horses and mules. Men on foot were coated up to the knee and movement off the roads became impossible. Shell craters filled with a quicksand, which could drown soldiers and animals. A French writer called the Somme the worst on the Western Front. Engineers labored all summer to keep roads open and to lay new ones, build corduroy roads of logs and railway sleepers, and laid duckboard tracks as the front moved eastwards. The slow Anglo-French advance increased the distance that supplies had to be carried from the intact road system in the rear to the front line on the far side of the beaten zone, which brought the transport system close to collapse whenever it rained. More vehicles on the roads accelerated their decrepitude, and Bean wrote that many of the lorries broke down and were pushed aside. Haig wrote on 21 November that the ground, sodden with rain and broken up everywhere by innumerable shell holes, can only be described as a morass, almost bottomless in places between the lines, and for many thousands of yards behind them it is almost, and in some localities, quite impassable. The supply of food and ammunition is carried out with the greatest difficulty and immense labor, and the men are so much worn out by this and the maintenance and construction of trenches that frequent reliefs, carried out under exhausting conditions, are unavoidable. Stretcher bearers worked 4 to a stretcher, reinforced by pioneers, men from divisional supply trains and anyone else who could be spared. including prisoners, from Goudecourt to the Longueval tramway. The carry was 3,500 yards, 3,200 meters, in 3 stages. Illness increased in the British armies, but routine measures to prevent trench foot, by rubbing feet with whale oil and donning dry socks, reduced the number of cases compared to 1915. Despite the increase in the size of the BEF, combined frostbite and trench-foot admissions to hospital in 1916 were 16,955 men against 22,718 the year previous. On the week ending the 28th of October, there were 707 admissions, 1099 the next week and 1417 during the next 2 weeks. By the 30th of December, 9,370 cases had been admitted in the BEF in the year, about 12.82 per 1,000 men as measured by ration strength. Subsequent operations equals the 23rd of October equals. After the dismal result of the attack on the 18th of October, Foch, Haig, Rawlinson and Gough met and agreed to reduce the scope of attacks. Weather permitting, the 4th and 6th Armies were to attack on the 23rd of October towards Le Transloy, ready to capture the village on the 26th of October, as the French advanced towards Rocquigny in stages. The full program for the armies on the Somme was washed out. Despite urging by Joffre for another general attack, Haig rejected the pressure from Joffre and denied that he was procrastinating. It was dry from 20 to 22 October, as 14th Corps prepared to attack to the far side of the spur in front of Le Transloy, where after a 30-minute halt, the creeping barrage would move at 50 yards, 46 meters per minute, followed by the infantry, whose battalions had fallen lower than half strength during the recent fighting. Dawn was so foggy that Cavan agreed the postponement with the French from 11:30 am -2:30 p.m. The 4th Division attacked with 2 battalions of the 11th Brigade, next to the French 152nd Division. The 1st Hampshire and the French were quickly stopped by enfilade fire from Boritzka-Banasca Trench opposite and from machine guns hidden in shell holes, but when reinforced by the 1st Rifle Brigade, established posts northwest of the trench. To the left, the 2nd Royal Dublin Fusiliers joined with the left of the Hampshires. After capturing gun pits and a strong point further on, the 1st Royal Warwicks were to leapfrog through the Fusiliers but became mixed up, and attempts to advance were defeated in hand-to-hand fighting and then flanking fire from both sides. The 12th Brigade on the left was defeated by machine gun fire from Dewdrop Trench near the Lesbos-Le Transloy road. Parties of the 2nd Essex who got into the trench being overwhelmed. The 1st King's Own captured the German part of Spectrum Trench to the north of Dewdrop Trench and then advanced further. Help arrived from bombers of the 2nd Dukes, but only Spectrum Trench could be held. The 6th Division had been relieved by the 8th Division, and the 23rd Brigade attacked with the 2nd Scottish Rifles and 2nd Middlesex, capturing Zenith Trench. The Rifles advanced another 200 yards, 182 meters, and took Orion Trench, but were bombarded out again late in the afternoon, as Middlesex attempts to bomb northwards failed. On the left, the 25th Brigade attacked the north end of Zenith Trench with the 2nd Lincolnshire, which was stopped by small arms fire, except for a few men who linked with the 2nd Middlesex. The 2nd Rifle Brigade further left was unable to capture a strong point where Zenith and Eclipse trenches met, but managed to set up posts about 130 yards, 120 meters, forward of the British front line. In the 24th Brigade area, the 2nd East Lancashire captured most of Mile Trench. took about 50 prisoners and defeated counter-attacks from the flanks. Equals the 28th of October, the 15th of November equals. Having relieved the 4th Division on the night of 23-24 October. The 1st Middlesex and 4th King's Liverpool of the 33rd Division. Major General R. J. Pinney attacked at 6:00 a.m. and captured Rainey and Dewdrop trenches, but by 9:30 a.m. both had been bombed back out of Dewdrop Trench. Next day the 19th Brigade attacked on the right of the division with the 1st Camerons and the 5/6th Scottish Rifles to take more of Boriska Trench, but were repulsed by fire from machine guns in shell holes. During the day, the 17th Division, Major General P. R. Robertson, relieved the 8th Division. On the 30th of October, the 1st Anzac Corps, Lieutenant General W. R. Birdwood, relieved the 15th Corps between 14th and 3rd Corps. On the 1st of November, the French attacked I Stellung from the south towards the Saale-Isles and forced back Bur 20, taking 208 prisoners. On the night of the 31st of October, the 1st of November, a regiment of the 39th Division prepared the jumping-off points for a counterattack by IR 126 and IR 132 at 6:30 a.m. But the two attacking regiments were late and arrived exhausted. Air support was cancelled because of the weather and the French were ready when the attack began. German artillery fired short and French small arms fire repulsed the attack. French attacks continued for the next week and a small part of St. Pierre Vaast Wood was captured on the 5th of November. Through gaps in the positions of IR 126 and IR 172. On the 9th of November, the French and British attacked from Bouchavans to the Ancre, and next day the 185th Division relieved the 39th Division, in which IR 126 had lost 1229 casualties, including 205 killed. On the 4th Army front, the 19th Brigade of the 33rd Division attacked again with the 1st Cameronians and the 5/6th Scottish Rifles, who got into Boriska Trench and were then repulsed. At 3:30 p.m., the 1/9th Highland Light Infantry, 1/9th HLI, and the 2nd Worcesters attacked Boriska Trench with the French, but mud, exhaustion and machine gun fire from Le Transloy forced them back out. Next day the 17th Division tried a surprise attack at 5:30 p.m. with a party of the 7th Borders, 51st Brigade, and captured the rest of Zenith Trench. A counterattack was defeated and a trench block set up 150 yards, 140 meters, along Eclipse Trench. On the 3rd of November, the 7th Lincolns of the 51st Brigade repulsed a counterattack on Zenith Trench and cleared a German foothold, assisted by the 7th Green Howards that evening. An attack by the 1st Queens of the 100th Brigade on Boriska Trench failed. On the 4th of November, a 98th Brigade attack on a ridge east of Dewdrop Trench failed, and on the 5th of November the 33rd Division attacked at 11:10 a.m. with the 2nd Worcesters, who captured Boriska and Mirage trenches and joined with the 16th KRRC that had captured Hazy Trench. In the 19th Brigade area to the left, the 2nd Royal West Kent advanced along the Lesbos-Le Transloy road but were unable to hold on. After patrols of the 7th East Yorks and 7th Green Howards of the 50th Brigade on the left were repulsed, the 1st Anzac Corps attacked on the left at 12:30 a.m. with the 1st Australian Division in a downpour against a salient north of Goudecourt. In the 1st Brigade, the 3rd Battalion bombed forward, but the repulse of the 1st Battalion during two frontal attacks and a bombing attack on Hilt Trench forced a withdrawal on the 3rd Battalion. The 7th Brigade attacked with the 27th Battalion on the right flank. A composite battalion of the 25th Battalion and a company each from the 26th and 27th Battalions in the centre and the 28th Battalion on the left, in which parties of the 27th Battalion entered Bayonet Trench and then retired at dusk. Troops of the composite battalion reached the maze and held on, but the 28th Battalion was repulsed twice and retired. On the 8th of November, the 33rd Division was relieved by the 8th Division, and after a lull with some dry days, and on 14 November, the 2nd Australian Division made a joint attack with the 28th, 25th and 27th Battalions of the 7th Brigade. The 28th Battalion was relieved by the 19th Battalion brought up from reserve. The 50th Division on the right of 3rd Corps cooperated with the 1/5th th and 1/7th th Northumberland Fusiliers of the 149th Brigade. The combined attack beginning at 6:45 a.m. in the 2nd Australian Division area to the right of Blue Cut, that ran from La Barque to Eaucourt-l'Abbaye. The 25th and 26th Battalions to the right of the 19th Battalion were stopped by machine gun from the maze and artillery fire from the vicinity of Bapaume. The 19th Battalion and the 1/5th th Northumberland Fusiliers captured 350 yards, 320 meters, of Gerd Trench, but were unable to take Gerd Support Trench further on. The trench was flooded, so the troops retired to Gerd Trench and were cut off. The 1/7th th Northumberland to the left of the 1/5th th Northumberland may have captured Hooksap but did not secure the part of Gerd Trench. They were fired on from Butte Trench and disappeared. Later in the day, 2 counter-attacks were repulsed and half of the 20th NSW Battalion attacked the maze at 4:45 p.m., but was stopped by machine gun fire. At midnight, a party of the 1/4 th and 1/5 th Northumberland attacked on the opposite flank but were forced back. On the 15th of November, the remnants of the 1/5 th and 19th NSW Battalions that had met were isolated in part of Gerd Trench with a Lewis gun at either end. Rifle ammunition was used to feed the Lewis guns that engaged frequent German attacks. German Sturmtruppen supported by artillery around Bapaume made a determined attack from both ends of Gerd Trench, and the British and Australians were relieved at dawn by the 28th Battalion and 2 companies of the 1/4 th East Yorks. Opposite the French 6th Army. Operation Hanover. Unternehmen Hanover, a plan to recapture the fringe of St. Pierre Vaast Wood on the 15th of November. Succeeded, but other attacks to recapture the Saillisles failed and the Germans occupied Shell Hole positions on the outskirts. Commemoration. Newfoundland Memorial. The participation of the Newfoundland Regiment in the Battle of Le Transloy is commemorated with the Goudecourt Newfoundland Memorial. The memorial marks the place where the Newfoundlanders returned to the Somme in early October, after many losses incurred 4 months earlier, during an attack at Beaumont-Hamel. On the first day of the Somme, the rebuilt Newfoundland Battalion, part of the 88th Brigade, attacked on the right flank of 15th Corps with the 1st Battalion Essex Regiment, 1st Essex, and captured part of Hill Trench, an extension of Rainbow Trench northeast of Goudecourt. The 1st Essex pressed on and parties reached Grease Trench but then had to retire to the start line when the 35th Brigade attack on the left failed. The Newfoundlanders held on in Hill Trench and also bombed up it to capture some of the Essex objective and established a trench block. The memorial also marks the furthest point that the British advanced from the front line of the 1st of July. During the Somme offensive, the Rifle Brigade counted Le Transloy as one of their battle honours for the Somme. See also List of Canadian battles during World War I. Notes. Footnotes. Further reading. Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Le Transloy. Archived from the original on 20 October 2012. Retrieved 5 January 2013. Rifle Brigade Medals.